You like Peppa?
Frozen's number one.
My son is definitely all boy, but he loves Frozen.
Yeah, good. That'll last a while until he catches on the air of our culture, and
He probably won't ever want me to tell any of his friends that he loves Frozen.
Not. It's empowering women. Frozen, Elsa. A lot of maybe I'm coming out the closet kind of.
Yep.
All right, together now. Let it go. Let it go. I'm not a rotten prick anymore.
Yeah.
I'm cured. Yeah.
Maybe this podcast should just be what to do as a parent according to Austin, Bob, and Brittany.
That's a lot of manipulation is what I do. Because I just try to convince my daughter to do whatever I need her to do.
And spin it as kindness.
Exactly.
Which is the entire job description of a marketing person. All right,
That's always
transition. Hey there, and welcome to the recovery crew here at Deep Waters Recovery. I'm Dr. Bob Beare, and today's guest is Austin Beare, unique dude who has been through a lot and has transformed his life and is bringing a lot of love and healing to the world in a lot of different ways. Our co-host today is Brittany Bass. Many of you have been listening to this podcast, have enjoyed her comments and questions and bringing her own recovery to the table here. And so this is going to be a good day. We're all going to learn something together here at Deep Waters, where we're focused on transforming dependency, healing trauma, and launching into lives of passion and authenticity and juice. All right, you're in the deep waters now. Okay, so here we are again at the Recovery Crew, and I'm looking onto my screen and I see Brittany Bass has joined us as our co-host today. Hi, Brittany.
Hello, thank you.
And there is Austin Beare. I've been trying to drag him out of his hole for so long to get on this podcast. Not really, but I have poked at you a few times. And
you've been persistent.
I've been pretty persistent, and welcome, Austin.
Thanks, Dr. Bob. Good to be here.
All right. So we're going to have a juicy discussion with Austin and Brittany. Austin's going to kind of start it with his story, which I have heard. Actually, the first time I heard it was in an interesting setting that I'll talk about in a little while. But a few things have happened since then. A few things have happened since then. So I'm looking forward to this. Nicole Chargois, everybody say Chargois?
Chargois.
Just because it's fun to say.
Such a fun, yeah.
But that's not why we hired her as program manager of Deep Water, just because she has a cool last name. She happens to be a very organized person in combination with a really good healer. Are you there, Nicole?
I am here. Thank you
everyone
for pronouncing my name correctly. Wow.
So Nicole's going to let folks know how they can get in touch with us and what's going on here at Deep Waters.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. Deep Waters is an advanced recovery and healing experience for men and women. Letting you know, we have group programming focused on trauma resolution, second stage recovery. If you would like any more information about our programs or this podcast, The Recovery Crew, our direct number is 512-677-7847. You can also reach me directly at admin@deepwatersrecovery.com. Check out our website. It's deepwatersrecovery.com. We post weekly blogs from our community. Our podcast, The Recovery Crew, comes out weekly. Please follow us on all the social media sites. If you enjoy this podcast, like, share, subscribe. Leave us a comment or review, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Facebook. I think that's it.
TikTok.
Oh gosh, yes. Bob is
just figuring out TikTok.
Personality.
Yes, we are cool. Now, we have. I can say TikTok. That's where it starts.
Can't spell it yet, but we can say it. That's
right. It is difficult to spell, actually. You have to really study it hard to spell it right. Thank you, Nicole. So I want to introduce, I'm going to introduce Austin Beare. It's choking me up. And and then I'm going to turn you loose to tell your story. And then Brittany and I are going to interrupt you regularly and kind of make fun of you and
Perfect.
love on you, all that. Yeah?
Perfect.
So, Austin, where are you now in Florida?
Tallahassee.
You're in Tallahassee, but I know him well from the Houston and Austin area. We've worked together in this industry for quite a few years. He has now migrated just slightly out of the marketing world of the addiction world into you're the ambassador, or I don't know what your actual job title is, but with Lightning Step Technologies, which is another one of the brainchilds of our good friend George Joseph.
Correct.
Another one of his empires. But anybody that is in this industry listening to this, you care about it. Anyone else doesn't give a shit. But it is an electronic medical record system that does everything, unlike, and it's really built for the world that we all work in. So that's what Austin's up to now. Anything that he, in my experience, he puts his face in, he brings his heart to it. So they're lucky to have him over there. He went to business school in Alabama. I don't know if he finished it or if they let him in. How did he get in with Brittany? Did they even let him in? But then I don't know how he got out.
Back then and still now, if you were out of state and you pretty much had a pulse, they're going to let you in.
Listen, I have no room to talk. I'm 31 years old and I'm still working on my undergrad. So
yeah. Well, I have a bunch of degrees only because it's one of the things I've used when my life went to shit. Yeah. I go back to school. It's like, okay, give me something. But anyway, the big news is this kind of guy that was a little bit of a slacker, a little bit of a troublemaker, and a pretty serious addict has turned into to super dad and super husband.
Girl dad too.
Huh?
He's a girl dad too.
He's a girl dad too. And so it's all beautiful. And we're so glad to have you here, Austin. Why don't you take the time you need to tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, brother. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Bob. Yeah, no, I haven't told my story in a while, so this is gonna be fun. Kind of going through the history of my life again. It's different now. My sobriety date is September 17, 2012, so a little over 8 years, and now it's like more of the journey has been in the recovery piece than the addiction piece. It's getting to that point, right? I started using when I was 15, and I first got into recovery when I was 22. So yeah, it's about halfway. It's about the same length of time. So wow. Now it's just more of the hurdles staying in recovery and staying married and being a good dad and trying to be a good human. Without
maybe when you get over that certain number of years where you've been sober longer, maybe you can go back to drinking.
That's a good point. You could have enough time under your belt to make that happen.
Maybe you got this addiction thing figured out finally. Austin Beare, he might. I don't know, but
one thing is for certain. 8 years later, I'm still luckily and grateful that I know for a fact I can never drink a drop of alcohol again, right? Like I just can't. It's just, I know where it's going to take me. So like my story, my parents are still married, right? Amazing parents. My dad, Shane, my mom, Karen. I was the middle child. And I had a great childhood. We moved a bunch when we were real little, but we finally settled in Houston around Sugar Land area around kindergarten for me. And then we moved to Memorial around 4th grade. And I loved it. I had a lot of friends growing up, played a lot of sports, played golf, as you know, played baseball, played football in middle school. Things were great. And, for me, just like many other guys in recovery my age, puberty happens and I was a late bloomer and everybody else was getting hair in different places and I was falling behind, and that was the beginning of my insecurity and worrying about what people think about me. And that's just going to be the overall theme of my recovery and my addiction, right? It's just being controlled by fear of what others think and, how I need to put on this front depending on who's in front of me. I was a chameleon. Like I tell it all the time in my stories. I would talk in different ways to different people depending on who I was around, different accents, you know. If I was with my hunting buddies, I'd put on more of a drawl. You know, I was from Houston, so I had like the street talk, and then I'd be in front of school and I have this more professional talk to my parents. And so I just never could be myself. That's really the overall theme of it. So, you know, when I found alcohol and drugs, and like I said, I was 15, it was just finally I could just kind of relax and I wouldn't be so overwhelmed and my mind would stop racing. I didn't care so much about what people thought about me, and it was great. It worked amazing. Like I had confidence. And I was able to do that through high school and honestly, I had a great time. I got in trouble a few times. I put my life in risk one time where it was my first kind of sign of, hey, you might have a problem. When I was 17, me and two buddies were doing this thing. I don't know. We were in the Jim Beam is what we drank. It was Jim Beam and Coors Light. And we had this thing where three of us would finish a handle on a night. And so I was the last man standing. This was like the third weekend in a row we'd done it. And I don't know, I could have stayed at 4 or 5 different places, but like for some reason I had to go home, you know, and I don't know why. People tried to get me to stay. I was like, no, I got to go home. So I drove. And what eventually happened, I woke up to a cop knocking on my window. And I was in front of the elementary school I went to school at, middle of the street, car still in drive, foot on the brake, and just passed out. I was arrested that night. My dad picked me up the next morning. And it was, you know, obviously I was in a lot of shame because I just got in trouble. You know, I just let my dad down. But looking back at it, like it never crossed my mind I might have a problem at that moment.
Yeah, it wasn't enough trouble, right?
No, I remember telling my dad, like, everybody's drinking like this. You know, I went to Memorial in Houston. It was, I believe that everybody drank the way I drank and partied the way I partied. And come to find out, that wasn't true at all. There were majority of kids at Memorial High School who were doing the right thing. I just surrounded myself with the people that were doing what I was doing to make, you know, justify the way I drank and used.
And that's the way the disease works, and it narrows our mind so we can only see what will keep us using.
Exactly.
because of what you said just a minute ago, it finally fixed that anxiety and fear.
That's it.
You know, and our system is so wise. It's really trying to take care of us. Even the addict is trying to take care of us and keep things, you know, this is working, right? And so we start putting these blinders on. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. The blinders are exactly right.
I grew up in a time, check this out. I got woken, this is part of my story, woken up 3 times in the middle of the street by a cop. But this was back in the 70s and 80s where you could get away with that shit.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, hey man, pull over. But yeah.
Well, I technically did get away with it, right? That's another part of my story. Like with my family and my dad, he worked his ass off to provide a great life for me, my brother, and my sister. Always traveling. He worked in finance, and he was one of the managers in Houston. He was traveling all the time, going to New York. So he wasn't there all the time, but he was there as much as he could be, right? Like, and he did a great job as a dad. But because of that, you know, we lived in a nice neighborhood, and I got arrested by the city cops there, and I didn't get a DWI on my record. I got a public intox, right? Yep. So that's kind of the beginning of also like this, a better than starts to grow in my personality of like, look what I can get away with, right? Because look who my dad is, right? Which is not good for me. So eventually,
was your dad an attorney by chance?
Sorry?
Was your dad an attorney?
No.
Chance?
He worked in finance.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like wealth management, investment banking, stuff like that.
No,
he wasn't.
Just telling my story. That's why I'm nodding over here.
Right. And, you know, to speed things up, it's like I started doing cocaine in high school. It allowed me to drink longer. You know, the thing was though, you know, I talk about like feeling comfortable in my skin. I was still controlled by a lot of fear, especially like around girls, like being able to talk to girls, being able to make a move on a girl. Like I just couldn't do it back then. And so it was more of like, I'm going to drink and I'm going to use and be this kind of like cool guy over here, just to kind of make up for like my lack of any kind of communication skills with women, right? Suffered from acne, so that was always bothering me. Like couldn't have the confidence. So it was just a constant cycle of like shame and not feeling good about myself and not feeling comfortable in my skin. And you know, I finished high school and it was like, I'm going to take off and get away from here and start over. And my brother went to Ole Miss, and so it kind of opened up the door to this SEC idea and party schools. And my dad really, at that time, wanted us to go to a big school. He went to the University of Texas at Arlington. So, you know, one of his regrets was, you know, not having that camaraderie of going to a big school. It's just such a part of our culture today. You know, it's so big. And so he, you know, he definitely did not try to deter me from going to the University of Alabama. But that's where I ended up going. And, you know, on the first day at the University of Alabama, I was in the dorm. My mom had, we just moved in. It was summer session. So I literally left 2 weeks after graduation. I could not wait to get out of there and kind of be this new person, this new Austin. And the first day I meet this guy, his name was, we call him Mika. I'll just say that. We called him Mika. And he was like 26, 27 years old in the freshman dorm. So, you know, it probably wasn't the best setup, but he was the first guy I met. And he was like, hey man, you want to smoke a bowl? And I was like, yeah, let's go, let's roll. And we went to Walmart and we got back, and next thing you know, he's like, hey, have you ever heard of Oxycontin before? And I was like, no, I had no clue. And at that time, I dabbled a little bit with Xanax. I knew what that was. I enjoyed that, right, to come down from cocaine, but I'd never heard of this Oxycontin or really had taken any kind of pain pill. So he's like, you want to try it? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So I did my first line of Oxycontin on the first day of Alabama. And that's just, I remember looking back at it, and then the next day I was just so overwhelmed, like, man, this thing is incredible, this drug. I mean, I just felt like I could do anything, you know, just like warm blanket inside my body, just everything went away, everything in my life, any worry I had. And I remember calling a friend and telling her, like, yeah, I did this drug called Oxycontin last night. And she's this pretty straight edge girl at that time, right? Like she just drank and partied a little bit. She never did drugs. But I remember calling her and telling about it because I didn't really have any concept that it was really that big of a deal. Like, you know, now that I know, it's like what I was doing was synthetic heroin, right? But back then I'm like, well, this was from a doctor prescribed. It's just a pill. So I was just talking about it like, hey, this is nothing. And come to find out, like this drug would just take me down the next 2 or 3 years very, very quickly, which I'm grateful for, right? Like if I didn't get introduced to more hard drugs like cocaine and Oxycontin, it would have just kept me out drinking and using longer because my life wouldn't become as unmanageable as quickly. So because of that, I was able to get sober young.
Yeah, that's probably never been said in public before. Thank God for Oxycontin.
Right? Thank you for your karma.
100%.
But I get it. I get it.
Really,
yeah, go ahead, Brittany.
sorry, I was just going to say, I just had this thought, like, have there ever been any, I don't think that there are to my knowledge, but it's so interesting because I have this belief, it may be unpopular, but I don't think that like a primary meth addict, right, has the same brain as a primary opioid addict. Like, of course, there's us, like Austin, I'm sure you, Dr. Bob, who abuse multiple substances, but like, I'm talking about like that question, like if you were on a deserted island and you only had one thing, what would it be, right? For those of us where it's Oxycontin, like I'm identifying with a lot of what Austin said about like, I just can't fucking stand being in my skin. And I find this thing and it's like, oh my gosh. And that's not that's not everyone else's experience. Yeah. I'm trying to put my thoughts into words, but I think that like we all struggle with that to some degree, but it seems like with the opioid addicts, there's just such a common thread of, of just this despair and this loneliness way before the drink or the drug was ever picked up. And so my curiosity would be, have there been any studies on like traits of different people who go to different things?
Yeah, I think we're all built different. We find that one that really goes to the underlying wound, right? Which we'll talk about a little more, Austin. Hopefully, you know, we started using because of our trauma. It didn't cause the addiction, but your whole opening, Austin, was describing the pain that you were carrying into your life. And when we say trauma, we don't mean necessarily abuse.
Right, exactly.
But, you know, there was uncomfortable stuff in all of our childhood. We are from dysfunctional families, even though we're all from good families. They're so good. It's not about them anymore. We are built to, when we're kids, we're sponges, and we sponge up certain things, and then we find certain drugs that will hit the sponge, right? And yet,
exactly.
Of course, there's a lot of studies about it, which I'm not going to. I don't have them here, but I think it'd be good to keep them to attach them to this podcast, Nicole, if you want to dig that stuff up. But the other point that I'm just dancing with right here is on our last podcast with a guy that you know and work with /for, actually said, "Thank you, God, for that I got arrested. Thank you. It was the best thing that ever happened." Those, regular people don't say shit like we just, thank you for OxyContin. But the point is, whatever it takes to get us there, but not die, right? And fortunately, you didn't die, although we have, we all know many who didn't, that went past the bottom, right?
Right. And I used to be more outgoing and be more sociable, right? But in the end, it just made me more isolated and more alone, right? That's when it took the turn, where it was just me by myself in an apartment. Just the only thing where I eventually ended up was, it was just waking up every day, trying to figure out where I'm going to get pills, going to get 99-cent tacos at Jack in the Box, because then I had more money for pills. And that was it. That was my life towards the end. It was like, we can speed up, and I had a couple of arrests, DWI, when I was 21. But eventually, I'm 22. I'm in Houston. I'm alone, miserable. And what eventually happened was my pill dealer, who actually he's passed away now. He overdosed and died. He was trying to in and out of the rooms, but he called my brother, and my brother was in recovery at the time. He went to treatment out in Mississippi, and said, "Hey, look, man, your brother Austin, he's got a problem. He's coming from my drug dealer, right? He is blowing me up all day, every day. Like, you need some help." So it's not a good sign when that's happening. So eventually, like, an intervention happened, a quasi intervention, if you will. My brother had went through treatment, and so my dad had some experience of kind of figuring it out. I think he had 2 years sober at the time, and he came in, sat me down, and it was just pretty much set the boundaries. Like, this is what it's going to look like. You can either come with me and get sober, or you're out on your own, and that's it. And initially I thought, like, okay, I'm just going to screw this. I'm not losing this. This is the one thing that makes me feel all right. Like, you're not taking these drugs away from me. And initially I was just like, sure, like, fine, I'm going to do this on my own. I was thinking of, like, whose couch I was going to sleep on, and I was trying to figure it out, how I was going to manage in my head. And I think I had like a speeding ticket or something I hadn't paid. And he was like, "Let's go take care of this first. I'll do this one last thing for you." So we were driving, and I remember my dad looked at me. He says, "Okay, if you're going to do this, here's the telephone." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I want you to call your mom and tell her that you're never going to see her again. Tell her you love her, but you'll never see her again as long as I'm using." And I don't know what it did. It got me, where I was just like, I just surrendered. I was like, okay, let's go. Fine. And I didn't go to treatment. They live in Spicewood, Texas, where they still live. And I moved out there with them, and I go to meetings during the day. And I would help around the property in the morning, which looking back, my wife likes to make, and I tell this in my story, she makes fun of me just because it's still with me today. Like on some things, my procrastination and laziness, because I was never a straight A guy. Like I had friends who could drink and use and they could just make A's and work all the time nonstop. That wasn't me. I got nothing done at all. Like I was the laziest. They had a nickname for me. They called me One Sock because they would find me, in the recliner. I'd only have like one sock on. I'd just be there all day, just worthless. And so he had like 10 acres and he had all these rocks on his property. And so he wanted to build this wall around his house. And so that was like my first task was like, I'm like 2 days sober. It's the summer. It's June. And I'm out there stacking up these rocks to trying to build this wall. And so what I would do and what I did in a week, right? My section of the wall was maybe like, I don't know, 20 yards, if that. I mean, like minimal. And he also has this guy named Carlos who would come out and do work. And what Carlos did in a day, he finished the entire wall. So it's probably 12 times what I can do in a whole week, right? So I was just a mess. I couldn't, just trying to get simple things done was impossible for me in early recovery.
Maybe there was some other things you were better at, Austin.
That's true, but it still carries over today. And, my wife I'll show you all this. So I don't like painting, but like this is my office and this yellow is horrendous. It's just like washes out your face. I'm on Zooms every day. One of the founders of the company, one of the owners, he's always on my butt about it, like to make my presentation. Like this is the big leagues now. So I wanted to repaint my room and my office. And so I started painting and I got one wall done. And she was like, you only painted one wall, my wife. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do one wall a day. Like, it's just that I'm just miserable by it. And so this is where I'm at so far. Like, you can see this wall is painted.
I like the green though.
And we got this wall painted, not complete yet. And I still got this wall, and it's been about a week. So it's just like I push things off when it comes to stuff I just don't like doing. It's just, that's my problem. And we'll talk more about it with no shortcuts. Because that's what I did as an addict. I was always looking for shortcuts to how to make my life quicker and easier, to get drugs faster, money quicker. Just always looking for, I never wanted to actually put in the work. And I struggle with that today. So thank God I found recovery. So what eventually happens, I'll speed it up a little bit. I meet this guy. I was working at a Barton Creek. It's like a resort and golf place. And I was working at the golf desk. And there's this guy.
We used to have parties on those golf courses.
You used to what?
We used to have parties on that golf course in high school.
Oh, nice.
They've changed it now. They've got all this high security, probably because of us, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's they're the real deal now. I was over at the Canyons, kind of more secluded one. And there's this guy who kept on coming out there. He was a member. And every time he would come out there, everybody would come up and talk to him. And everybody's laughing. And he was just like, his energy was amazing. And, I eventually meet this guy. And his name is Cole. And I'm talking to Cole just randomly. This is 2012. I don't have a sponsor at the time. I'm going to meetings. I'm showing up late. I'm leaving early. I'm not talking to anybody. I don't even know what the 12 steps are. I don't even know what the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous really is. I just think I just go to meetings and that's it. It's going to keep me sober. So I come to find out, like 2 weeks go by and one of my coworkers was like, hey, do you know he's sober too? And I was like, really? I had no idea. And so one day I went up and talked to him. It was Cole Shiflett. And I'm like, hey man, I heard you're sober. I'm sober too. And he's like, oh man, awesome. And he's like, well, how long do you got? I was like, I got like, I don't know, 60 days. Just trying to figure it out. I don't know what I'm doing. And I remember asking him, like, I was like, how are you so happy? Right? Like, because at that time I'm still just white knuckling it. Like
they took away your best friend, man.
I know, man. And I wanted what Cole had. That is exactly what I wanted. And so I eventually asked him, like, how'd you do it? And he asked me if I'd never ever worked the steps. I said no. And he's like, you want to work the steps? I said sure. And we started going through the work. And he taught me how to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and to do a thorough 4-step. And we did an amazing 5th step. And eventually we get to the 8th step. And that's when I kind of was like, I think I had around 6 months at the time. I was plugged in at the Center for Students of Recovery at the University of Texas. Ivana Grahovak was running the program. We were in the basement of the social work building. And I met all of my friends there. So I had the fellowship, I had my sponsor, I was doing the work, like things were starting to come together. I was starting to enjoy life again. I mean, we had a blast at CSR. Living the Dream group, those guys, you know, they mean so much to me. Majority of them were in my wedding. It was just learning and growing up with them and understanding like, hey, it's just not about getting sober. It's about growing professionally and personally and getting your life bigger and bigger. It's not just like, hey, let me just get a part-time job and just the only thing I got to do is stay sober. There's more to life than that. And that's what they really pressed at Living the Dream and CSR. But when eventually I get to step 8 and I start kind of taking it back a little bit where I'm like, well, I don't really need to do these amends because, you know, they know I'm sorry. I've been sober 6-7 months. Like I'm trying to do right. Like I don't need to do this.
And I've told them I'm sorry enough times.
Exactly. They
I'm
know.
sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry is the favorite song of a good addict, right?
That's, you know, they don't need to hear it. They know, they can see it. And what eventually happens is I meet a girl. I start doing school full time. I start doing work full time. And, you know, I was like, well, I need something to help me out. And I was prescribed to Adderall when I was in high school and college. And so I went to a doctor, got Adderall, didn't tell him I was in recovery or anything like that, just got what I needed. And that eventually took me back out for another 3 months until eventually it was a Sunday afternoon. I was on 6th Street with my coworkers. And I worked with this guy named Matt. He wasn't in recovery. He drank, he was just a normal drinker. And we're at the bar with everybody. And he just made this off-cuff comment out of nowhere where it's just like, Austin, it just seems like drinking is your priority, right? And it was just very kind of like, I thought this guy was my friend. Like, what are you doing? Why are you calling me out? We're at the bar where everybody's drinking.
Damn it.
And I just like, fuck, I was running from this. I was trying to avoid this. You know, those thoughts would creep in and I just keep on drinking and using to avoid it. So what eventually happened was I didn't have any money at the time. I was already behind rent with my roommates, just broke as can be. And I remember I got $40 from one of my roommates and I took off and I was walking down 6th Street and I got to 35 and I'm walking down 35 in Austin, Texas. And I'm in jeans and boots. And it's like, I'm trying to get to Riverside because I know I can score on Riverside. Right. Like, and I'd been doing cocaine a little bit, but for some reason it's like, I want to go get crack. And I only smoked crack maybe like once. My wife loves the story that I smoked crack. She thinks it's hilarious because she's like, can't see me smoking crack, but I did it once in Birmingham, Alabama. And for some reason, it was like, the alcohol's not going to do it. This guy just called me out. I'm in my head. Cocaine's not going to be enough. I want something. Let's go to the next level. And so I'm walking. And if you ever walk down 35 trying to get to Riverside, you run into Town Lake. And I ran into Town Lake and I realized, oh shit, like I got to walk around Town Lake. And I'm like, this sucks. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like I walked so far I started to sober up a little bit or what really happened. But the next thing I know is just I heard something tell me go to a meeting in my head. It was just go to a meeting. And I tell it all the time. I hear this stuff and I have this in my consciousness, like this good Austin, this good guy, whether, you know, now I can call it God when he's telling me these things of like, this is what you should do. And instead of saying fuck it and just blocking it and pushing it down like I've done my whole life, I actually listened for some reason. And that's when my real recovery started. So, you know, I called Cole the next day and he picked up and he was like, it didn't work out, did it? That was the first thing he said. And we both had a laugh. And I was like, I need to do this. I need to go through the steps. Like, I'm not going to walk around this anymore and take my time. Like, let's go. Let's meet tomorrow. And we did. And as you know, Bob and Brittany, with Cole, that guy is the worst with his phone. The worst. Right? Like you can never get a hold of the fucking guy. And so like I would blow his ass up for the first month, just like we need to meet. And so we rock through a 4-step, we do a 5th step, we have an amazing experience. the first fifth step, it was more of like all the bad stuff I'd done, the secrets I had, right? I got off. But then the second one, that's what I thought was the big deal holding me back. The second was more of like my selfishness and like how it affected the people in my life close to me, right? Like, and I broke down when it started talking about how it affected my sister and my parents. And I really started to see, like, as I'm watching a movie, like what I was actually doing. I was starting to wake up. And we got to the men's part, and I'm like, I'm not going to set a pause this time. And so what happened is, I had at a golf club at Barton Creek, people did it, right? You always found extra ways to make money. And so maybe you waived a rental fee here, or you waived something here for the guy and he'd tip you some cash. I saw other people do it, and I was doing it for the last year and a half, trying to make extra cash. And it just wasn't sitting with me, right? Like, what I was doing was stealing from the company. And it's exactly what I was doing was stealing. And so me and Cole were talking about it, and we said, well, we got to be careful about this, how we want to do it. Let's figure this out first. And I remember I woke up one morning and I was in prayer and meditation, and I was like, you got to go in today and do it. So I went into the office to my boss, who was a close friend of mine, been over to his house with his family and kids, eating dinner, looked up to him, and I sat him down and said, hey, look, this is what I've been doing. I probably stole this amount of money by doing these kind of favors. How can I make this right? Right. And he just looked at me, and the only thing he said was like, you got to get out of my office. Right. And I was fired. And that was it. That's all he said. I mean, he just, the look in his eye, I can still see it today. And I left, and I drove, and I was just like really emotional. And I pulled over the side of the road, and I called Cole, and I told him what I just did. And all I know is, like, at that moment, I started to realize, like, what it really means to be a man. Like, because I would just always secrets and avoid conflict and just never owned up to it, make excuses. And this first time, like, hey, this is who I am. And I really never felt more connected to God than I did in that moment. So that's how I kind of started to work in treatment. Cole had just opened the Last Resort, and he's like, hey, look, we fired this guy. We've been open a week. He was the 3 to 11 tech. Do you want the job? I'm like, I got no other options. Sure, let's go. Let's take it. And I started my journey at TLR, and I worked out there as a 3 to 11 tech. I lived out there for 6 months, which was kind of a dumb idea, but I was able to save some money. It was miserable. I had a lot of fun. I had a blast, and it was like that first wave of guys. I fell apart with them, going to meetings, driving the bus, and my life was recovery. That's just what it was. Everything about it. There was nothing else. That was it. It was either,
I love this little transition right here, because I want to say a couple of things, because I was around within the next year of this story, I think, is where we connected, right?
Yeah, about the year.
I want to back up just a little bit, because you were making a formal amends to your employer,
right,
with the support of a sponsor, not just winging it, although it was probably your first one, probably not that great at it. Or maybe one of the first ones, right? So I just want to say, I want to say that, especially for folks that are new in recovery, we're not suggesting anybody go blasting into your employer and say all the bad shit that you did. But maybe, but get a guy like Austin to kind of coach you before you do it, because he's been there. Or my dad, when I told him, he was like, that was the worst idea you ever done. So it might have been, but we don't know. But there is a process in 12-step recovery that's pretty well laid out. If you do the whole process, that is a really unusual thing, in my experience, to get fired or somebody say, get the hell away from me. 99 out of 100 times is like, wow, thank you for your honesty, right? Wouldn't you say? I mean, that was a little bit unusual, but was
obviously like some deeper meaning. Like, Austin was not supposed to stay at that job,
Yeah, probably.
Exactly.
Apparently not, because you didn't. I got a buddy that says, why, when somebody says, why are you here? He says, well, I don't know. I'm here. Why? What do you mean, why? So, but there's like good themes in there. Getting arrested, not you, but our colleague, OxyContin. Thank you, God, for Oxy. Doing an amends in kind of a half-assed way and getting fired, and then winding up in this business. And look at this. Look at how many people you've helped. But
yeah,
anyway.
that's exactly it. Like it was, you know, I was giving my life over to God. Like you take it. Where am I supposed to go? And started trusting that, and started working at the Last Resort as a tech, like I said. And then I really loved it, and I wanted to be successful and good at it. So I started working hard. And at that time, we were brand new, and I was just doing anything I could. I was doing like the website stuff, IT stuff, a little bit of marketing, trying to help out Cole. And what eventually happened was Cole left the Last Resort, and they needed somebody to do admissions. And I had helped build the website. So I learned doing that. I'm so lucky I did that. I learned everything about the Last Resort, and I really got like a crash course on treatment, all the terminology, you know, what to talk about, what to focus on. And so Cole left, and we needed somebody to do admissions, and they're like, well, Austin, you do it for now, and we're going to continue looking for somebody to take it over. Well, I had this mindset of like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be amazing at it. And that's what I did. I started talking to families, and I was really good at it. And eventually
you like put both socks on. Holy shit.
Yeah, both socks are on now. And became eventually director of admissions at the Last Resort. And I had a great mentor out there. First, it was, you know, learning more about the clinical side of treatment with Todd Dugas. That guy was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Really teaching me about the attention to detail. And then for sales and marketing, I had Bill Schneider, professional persistence, right? Like, that's Bill, you know, that still sticks with me today. It carried over to my personal life. Like with my wife, she'll tell you, I was pretty persistent to get her to go out with me, just to convince her.
I've actually heard the story of Austin. You know, it's funny. I was working for a different company, and I went out to TLR to sit with I think it was you and Will Brown.
Yeah, I remember.
And I think you told me about how you met your wife.
Yeah, so like that's when I was talking about earlier. Like my sobriety now is like this 8 years. It's more than my addiction. I don't even want to talk about my addiction. I get more excited about talking about like what I've done sober, right? Like. So I meet this chick. Well, I haven't even met her yet. And this goes into one of kind of like this no regret aspect, because in my drinking and my using, I would just like stew on it, go to the bar, be that sad, lonely guy. Like I would never take any action. I would just be like, I should have done this, I should have done that, or make an excuse, and nothing would ever happen. I would never do anything and just wake up and you continue to use the next day. I was paralyzed by fear. And so now it's just like, I'm just going after whatever I want. And so
tell us how you met her though.
Yeah. So we had a guy named Ryan English, and he was a tech supervisor at the Last Resort, the RAM. He's now over at Solstice Recovery with Cole Shipley. And he comes into my office like, hey, I met this therapist at a meeting, and she wanted to come out and tour the Last Resort. And I'm like, all right, well, great. Give me her contact information, and I'll give her a call. Well, he never gave me the contact information. And so at that time, I was just admissions specialist. I get promoted to director of admissions like 2 or 3 weeks later. Like I got the big title now, and I felt all confident, and, you know, ego and walking with a strut. And I get on LinkedIn because I wanted to show off my new title. And I start just clicking, connecting with anybody I could find. Well, sure enough, I clicked on this girl named Katie Ropes, and she sends me a LinkedIn message, and it says, hey, I ran into Ryan. I really want to come out there and tour, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, I respond, that sounds great. What time can you come out? And she's like, well, I'm busy right now. I'm tied up. I don't know if I can make the drive out there. Well, I was like, well, how about we meet for coffee? I live in Hyde Park, and she lives in Hyde Park too. And she said, great. I was like, okay, great. We'll meet for coffee. And I wrote, A, we can either talk about treatment, or B, we can talk about everything else besides treatment, right? A little smooth line. I actually learned that line from Jeremy Sosa, okay? Picked it up from Sosa. And so he sends back B. And I'm like, all right, this is great. I got this date. And I was over at a buddy's house, and I'm sitting with this guy named Will, and I remember he looked at me, he's like, I got a feeling about this one, Austin. I was like, man, I do too. I got a good feeling about this girl. So I go and I drive to this coffee shop, and she comes up to the table, and the first thing I say is like, I've never been on a LinkedIn date before. And she kind of looked at me like, what is this guy talking about? But just kind of went with it. So I'm thinking we're on a date. Come to find out, that was not the idea she had at all. She was just coming to meet me. She had been applying to PhD school for social work, and she wanted a backup plan. And she didn't want to continue working at this treatment center if she didn't get in and go try something new. So this date, I think it went amazing. I'm like cracking jokes and everything's awesome. And come to find out, she thought I was like the most obnoxious human being, just ego through the roof guy, just like ridiculous. But I thought it was awesome. Like, I'm thinking that she was funny. I remember she was making me laugh. And so I think it went great. I tried to get her a second date. I remember Mark Rector too. It's like, we're all connected, right? So like, he was working at the Last Resort then. I remember talking to him about this girl, and like, she won't text me back. I was getting his advice. She was ghosting me. And he was just like, hey, just back off some, right? And so I'm like, okay. So it was like a month later, I start chirping at her again. And I started sending her articles or something. And I just wrote a blog. I didn't send her this article, but I wrote a blog for Last Resort. And she texted me and said, hey, I really liked your blog. And so she finally responded. So I just jumped on it. I'm like, hey, what are you doing tonight? Let's go do something. And I took her out to a dinner and a movie. And then from there, that was it. That's what happened. Like, we started dating. She got into Florida State PhD school. She eventually moved to Tallahassee. We eventually dated long distance, which that never works, right? I'm still working for the Last Resort. And so I'm like, one day she called me up and says like, hey, this isn't working. We need to end it. And I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. Like, this isn't going to work. And we had talked, like, if I ever found a job in Tallahassee, that I'd move out there, which is crazy. We only been dating maybe like 5-6 months, but it's, it's in love with this girl. So she dumps me. About a month later, maybe a month and a half later, I get a message from somebody on Facebook, Journey Pure, Patrick Dunn, which he always likes to, I talked to him yesterday. He loves to take credit for like my marriage and my kids. It wasn't for me. He calls me up where I find out they're opening up a center in Panama City Beach, which is an hour and a half from Tallahassee. Come to find out they're looking for a marketer in Tallahassee. And I just jump on this. I mean, you talk about making a quick decision. It was like, bang, bang, boom, let's do this. And I remember texting her saying, hey, look, I got this job offer. I think I'm going to take it. And I'd be in Tallahassee. And she responds with back, like, very kind of like, hey, that's great, but look, I've moved on. Like, pretty much she wanted to tell me, no, don't do it. I'm dating somebody else. But she said, I moved on. And I'm like, screw that, I'm doing this. So I call Patrick, I take the job. I, go out to my dad's place. I sit down with him and tell him, hey, look, I'm moving to Tallahassee for this job. I think it's a great opportunity. Just like all the BS, won't say it to anybody. Like, I need to go get this girl back, right? Everybody knew what I was doing. All my friends knew what I was doing. I was just like, I know I'm doing it for the job. I'm doing it for this. And I take off for Tallahassee. My dad even moved out there with me, like, drove the rental truck with all my stuff, and we moved into this apartment, and then he left a couple days later, but he supported me through this journey. And I look like the crazy stalker guy from just Tallahassee is a small town, and it's even smaller town when you're in recovery. Like, so everybody knew me and knew everybody in that town they knew who I was. I didn't really know who they were, but they knew who I was. I was the guy who moved across the country for this girl that everybody knew. And I just looked nuts, and I was just going to coffee shops I knew she went to, and she was dating this other guy, and it was just like a mess, and I was miserable. And that lasted for like 3 months, but I wouldn't give up. And so eventually I was in Destin, Florida for a work meeting, and I was talking to Stephen Long, and I was so miserable, and I was telling him, and I remember saying to him, I said, hey, you know what though, Stephen, I'm just glad I'm not drinking right now, because you talk about a mess, it'd be a real shit show. And he responds back on the phone. He goes, "That's bullshit, Austin." He goes, "You know what I heard?" He goes, "You're thinking about drinking, aren't you?" And like, and he was like right on it. I had gotten to that point where it's like nothing in my life was going right again. I was trying to force something that wasn't happening, right? I was trying to manage, and he hit it just a nail on the head. And I remember getting out of the car. I went on the beach in Destin, Florida. There's people all around me, and I hit my knees on the beach like I did when I first got sober. And I was like, "God, just take this from me. Like, I can't do this. I can't live this way anymore." And I had an amazing connection, amazing experience there. And sure enough, like a week later, I get a call from Katie, and she says something to me about what had happened that I didn't know about. But if I hadn't hit my knees and like asked God to say, "This is you, wherever you take me," I wouldn't be ready to hear what she had to tell me about me, right? But now everything started to make sense and understood. And next thing you know, we're going to eat breakfast on my birthday. And next thing you know, we're dating again. And next thing you know, I'm asking her to marry me. Next thing you know, we're getting married. And it's just my recovery has been this like amazing journey of just like going after what I want. And I've been, y'all know me, like I've lived in Austin, I moved to Tallahassee, I moved to Fort Lauderdale, right, to go work for my father-in-law a little bit. I moved back to Austin to go work back for Bill and Ann at the Last Resort. Then I went and worked with Peter over at Braintree, moved back to Tallahassee while having a baby, right? So it's like, it's just
a baby.
Yeah.
You have a baby? I know.
I'm a dad.
I know you do. You got one on the way too, right? It's a how could this all be?
Right. It's just been amazing. And it's
One Sock Austin has turned into this actual human being.
Right. And it's all because I got sober.
Yeah, let me say a couple of things about because there's so much. Have you seen Crazy Ex-Girlfriend? Has anybody seen the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend?
Mm-mm. But it's, yeah.
We just heard it. Austin Beare just described the whole plot of the show. But you know, there's another buddy of ours, Father Bill Wigmore. I heard him, and I've said that several times on here. He says, "Yep, go to meetings, all that stuff, but not doing that is not going to make you relapse necessarily. As much as we have to find something that's meaningful in our life to replace that old pal, right? That was fixing everything." And I could see the shift in you in your story when you found this work, right? I could tell you. It sounds like you showed up at work. You're like wanting to do it. It's a very different thing than just dragging ourselves around through our lives. So I think that third leg of recovery for me is the finding an authentic life, right? The other thing that I know about you, Austin, is you coughed up a bunch of hairballs at a particular workshop. We brought a bunch of professionals together in the Braveheart experience. And, I remember you had kind of a big bag of self-loathing on your back. And I don't know how long you've known Austin, but Austin used to kind of like drag himself around a little bit of a schlumper. But I don't see it anymore. I think, I think that those two little girls of yours are going to have a dad that stands up in his life now. That's what it sounds like to me. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's
beautiful.
It is. It's going into your Braveheart experience, right? Like, and we had to come up with our what is spirit animal, right? And in the beginning, it's like, I'm going to be this eagle. That's what because I'm like, this is stupid. I don't know, Bob. Like, spirit animal is the stupidest thing. I'm just giving
it's all whatever. It's all very, very ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm like, what is he talking about? And then towards the end of it, after we get done with the psychodrama, you ask that question, like, are you really an eagle? And I said, no, I'm a chipmunk, right? Which is like this little, right? This is little cute, little kind of fun little guy. I was like, that's who I am, right? I don't need to be anybody else. I don't have to act tough.
Well, here's another thing. I can't not say this, but I'm 20 years in the business. I had about 20 years in the clinical world, right? And then I come in, I'm going to be clinical director at the Last Resort, this big rock'em sock'em real deal recovery place. And I had only done half-ass recovery. up till then, right? So I get in there, and I really was just trying to be the clinical guy with all the answers, I think, if I remember right. And then I found out it doesn't work in the real deal recovery world. You know,
No.
working my own program is the only thing that was of value in that world. And so I learned quickly in my really, sometimes Austin, you felt like the only friend. I could cry about that. Because I think you knew a lot of the shadows that I was carrying. And the thing I want to point at is we went on several like marketing trips together.
Yeah.
And here I go, clinical director, last resort, right? With Austin, you know, he's just a guy in recovery. And we sit down with these guys with, you know, all my degrees and
I think it was Rock Springs.
Lots of clinical support. And I intro as, oh, Dr. Bob Beare. Yeah, nice to meet you and all that. Right. And then Austin launches in, and they could not wait to get out of there. It's like one of those obligatory meetings, right? And I said my shit, and then Austin launches into telling his story. And that, you know, the woman that was in there had a tear in her eye. Everybody else was like, I mean, Austin just flopped it out there. He told the nastiest, worst shit about his story, and it was the most, not on purpose, I don't think, just because that's who you are. You tell the truth now, and the truth's like it was an amazing wake up call for me.
Right, and all that passion was because like I essentially got sober at the last resort too. Like Bill and Ann were essentially with Cole, and they saved my life. Right, they gave me a purpose. You know, and then I met another guy in my life, Peter Perrano. Another guy who's been instrumental and helped me through a lot of tough years in my recovery, like navigating how to be married in recovery, right? Yeah, and that's where that passion comes from. I have so much passion for the last resort and just being there since day one. And I believed everything we did. And it was crazy back then too. We had Stephen Long, Frank Parisi, Dan Connolly, like these big book thumpers, like Real Deal. And we'd have these accountability groups. You remember those?
They're still happening out there, man. You started something and it's still happening. I was out there yesterday, and there's a couple of the new guys were just vibrating, the deer in the headlights.
It was accountability groups within the staff.
Oh, that's right. We used to do steel on steel
with staff members. It was like you were getting called out, right?
Yeah, we can't have any more. We can't have any of that now.
Don't give Corbin any ideas, Austin.
We're too busy.
Oh man, I mean, Stephen Long coming at you and Frank Parisi, it was just like you really focused on your recovery. And I loved it out there.
Yeah, but it's a very different model than the clinical model. It's not here I'm the licensed one, here's what you need to do. No, it's like I'm living my recovery and I'm going to challenge you to live yours.
Right.
That's all it is. It's like I'm not asking you to do anything I'm not doing.
And,
in fact, I'm only asking you to do a little bit of what I'm doing.
And when I first got sober too, and first working out there, I believed that was the only way. That was it. It's like this way or the highway, right? And the longer I'm in recovery and longer I work in the field, that way works great for a certain type of person. Somebody like me, or the chronic relapser who has no accountability in their life. They don't have any structure. But there are a lot of people who are disciplined already and connecting their family professionally, but they're struggling with this disease. Right.
Yeah.
Then all of us, knuckleheads, right? I had to go to a long-term treatment facility as well, but I had to evolve past that mentality of this way, and I had to soften. And for me, that looked like adding a lot of clinical work, which is really cool because at the last resort, we have, as Bob knows, we have expanded the clinical work that we do and become more trauma focused. And it just seems like as an industry too, that like, that's kind of what's starting to happen, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is a transition. And I am on that transition with you folks. And there's a catch-22 in it though. As soon as they hear a wise expert like Austin Beare say, well, some people don't need that really disciplined approach. It's like, oh, there's an addict in me. Oh, you mean I can just kind of half-ass this thing and put one sock on? So I want to make sure that we're speaking. That's right. It's not for everybody, but here's one thing that I will say that's true for me in 30 years of doing this. I think I can say it truthfully. The 12 steps work for everybody. It's 100% success rate for people that work it. Now, if you can't get them to work it, they don't want to work it. That's another thing. So that, which is the majority, but it's Carl Jung's philosophy in a popular expression, and it is powerful and transformational. And I don't know, somebody shows me something better, I'll consider it, but that's where I am with it. And sometimes it takes a little bit of a loving,
right. And you got to actually work it and want to work it. You have to get to that point internally where it's like, that's what I need to do. So not everybody can, what I'm starting to realize, not everybody can get to that point internally, and they need to figure something else out first, right? And
I'll send them to you. I'll send them to you now that you've matured and have so much flexibility.
Well, here's the deal. So it's like, we have this opioid epidemic going on, from starting with Purdue Pharma and Oxycontin, Vicodin, and all these pills. A lot of these people, they got hooked on pain pills. Like, they're physically already addicted, right? They might not have the addictive personalities, and so they can use MAT treatment and come off of it and be functionally normal again. And that's why you're seeing all this data showing, what MAT is actually doing. So I'm just saying, there's if you're a true drug addict, like, hey, look, you need abstinence-based treatment. I can say that all day, but not everybody's that. That's what I'm saying.
I got it. And it's absolutely true. And some people will use what you just said to not do the work.
Of course, so, exactly. Yeah,
but I am not doing a big battle against harm reduction, because it's keeping people alive. It may not be helping
especially
them.
right now. I mean,
absolutely.
COVID is just. I mean, it has right. Like, what COVID has done, what I see it is, like, I got, my drug and addiction kept me isolated, right? Alone, where that was it. It was just me. And COVID came in, and you had all these people in recovery, where we had, whether it was distractions in real world, able to go out and have fun, to kind of, or be just the actual human connection of going to meetings. But then COVID hits, and it took all that away, and then we're all back alone again.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, the relapse rates are unbelievable right now. People are dying like crazy. It's every week.
Yeah.
Every couple days. It's been a horrible
year for people dying this year. It's been exceptionally really bad.
There's counterpoint here, though. I mean, I'm just built that way. Somebody says one thing, I'm going to scrape up the opposite truth.
Okay.
One of them is, actually, I'm an example. I go to a meeting every day now, because I jump from one room and I'm in a meeting. My recovery has, and I also have, there's several people that have gotten sober and have never seen another person in a 12-step room. There's something that's happened here. There's something that's happened here where this is a whole new resource for us. That's one piece. The other piece about this whole COVID thing, I don't know, you guys know me pretty well. Slowing down is really good for me. And this thing has slowed me way down. But I also know, that's why treatment centers are packed right now. Look at Brittany; she's got rings under her eyes. They got a packed house.
That's genetic.
Yeah. No, you don't. I was just kidding.
I do.
But it's an epidemic in so many ways. There's more people dying from, I don't have the data, maybe you guys do. There's more people dying from overdoses than there are from COVID.
Okay. And
me on that.
And then the thing is too, you're right. It brought us this whole new resources of really telemedicine, which is amazing, and telehealth, and being able to do recovery groups online. But it's like we saw with our customers at Lightning Step, and a lot of our providers that switched to, they had outpatient facilities, and they switched to telehealth to do their IOP groups. In the beginning, the attendance was great, because it's like, this is awesome. Like, it's like, I don't have to drive in and beat traffic anymore. I just hop on my deal, a lot of these people are dealing with because of court issues. Some are dealing with it because they actually want to get sober. But about a month goes into it, month and a half goes into it, and they're seeing the attendance drop. It's like, why is that? Because they don't get that connection. Like you and I, Bob and Brittany, we know each other and we go back and we can get that connection via Zoom. But for people that come from all walks of life and in these groups, they don't know anybody, it starts to lose that appeal. Yep. Like
that's true.
Wanting to show up. So it's definitely given us this ability to blend technology and what we've been doing, right? But it can't be all of this, because this definitely is not going to work.
That's a pretty good transition, because the Deep Waters Intensive, the DWI that you never got, that I never got. If I would have gotten the DWI, maybe.
No, I got one.
Did you get one? All right, good.
21st birthday.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. So you can put that on your wall.
Got it.
But the Deep Waters Intensive, which is very similar to Braveheart, but it's for men and women, is going to be in the fall, or in the spring, as soon as the world starts healing and we can get back together. So I think it's a good transition moment. I think we're going to probably turn this into 2 podcasts, because there's some really juicy stuff that I don't know if anybody's going to want to like drink that whole gallon of beautiful truth from Austin Beare and Brittany Bass in one shot. So we might split this into 2. But does it feel like a good place to transition here, folks?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Austin, for being here. Brittany, why don't you guys let folks know how they can reach you? If you want to say a little bit more about what you're up to in the world, go for it.
Yeah, I am Brittany, as Bob stated before. I work for the Last Resort Recovery Center, residential treatment facility for men only, with a focus on trauma resolution. And I can be reached best via email at Brittany, BRITTANYB, at lastresortrecovery.com, or by phone 512-948-6403. And also, I just, it's on my heart to say that if 2020 is the year that you have entered into your sobriety, you are my personal hero. This is not going to be permanent. But if you have successfully gotten sober this year, thank you. And please reach out if anything resonated with you from either Austin or I.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Brittany. Thanks, Bob. So love doing this. Bob, I'll help you out. You got to pin me down. We'll work more on TikTok. I'll show you how to use Upwork. So I work for Lightning Step Technologies. We're based out of Houston, Texas. We're an all-in-one EMR software company. We also have a billing service arms too. So we pretty much can do anything for a treatment center in regards to the back office. But our EMR is different because it's all under one platform. So if you're tired of logging into multiple platforms for your billing, your CRM, your EMR, and then trying to tie all the data together in Excel to do a report, we streamlined it all. It's all together under one login. All cloud-based for mental health.
Can you send me a person that will actually put it in?
Oh, yeah.
that will actually log it in, or do I have to still type some shit in?
Well, you're going to need an assistant, so we'll have to find that for you.
I'm one of those weirdos that actually enjoys putting notes into the CRM.
Oh, my God.
I know.
Yes, that's the thing. We've made this EMR like super easy and efficient, but people still they want it to write the notes for them. It's like, that's not going to happen. You have to write the notes and do your job.
Okay, Dad. All right, Dad. I'll do it.
So you can reach me. You check us out, lightningstep.com. You can set up a demo through the website with me and Kirk Monroe, our CEO, show you all about it. If you're looking to switch and make your life a little easier, and you call me anytime.
Nice. Well, thanks a lot. So we got a lot going on here at Deep Waters Recovery, and Nicole Charbois is our program manager. And actually, she is the person and she's probably laughing at me saying, what's he talking about? He doesn't do anything. I do all the input of everything. But I appreciate you, Nicole. Will you say a little bit about what we have going on here?
Yes. Thanks, Bob, Brittany, and thank you, Austin, for telling your story with the recovery crew. But I'm with Bob. I would like an EMR that just writes my notes for me. That'd be great. That sounds good.
One day.
Yeah. If you'd like more information about the program or this podcast, you can reach us at deepwatersrecovery.com. Our direct number is 512-677-7847. Please share, like, subscribe, follow in order to support this mission of recovery, healing, and launching into lives of authenticity. Dr. Bob is the recovery and trauma guy, and he sees a limited amount of individual clients. And
because I have to write notes on, I only see. Go ahead.
Group programming. He also has that ongoing, and he alluded to the DWI, the Deep Waters Intensive. It's scheduled for spring 2021, so keep an eye out for that. Again, 512-677-7847 or admin@deepwatersrecovery.com.
And Bob has volunteered me to be one of the first females in his female version of Braveheart.
Ooh.
Yes, it's the Deep Waters Intensive. The one that we're doing in the spring is for all of the professionals who have been haranguing me to do one where women can be part of the intense work that. See Austin smiling back there. It's like it's really powerful, transformational, possibly the best trauma resolution work there is to do in our industry, at least.
Yeah.
But we'll see what you think about it.
Amazing weekend.
Yeah. So committed to that. There's also a certification program. Deepwater, actually, it's through the Creative Life Institute. You could you can be a certified experiential facilitator. So reach out to us for all of that stuff. So grateful, Austin, that you found time in between being dad and husband and superstar marketing guy. And Brittany, thank you so much for bringing your just great energy. Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for everyone. Please subscribe to this. Everybody subscribe to the YouTube version of this thing, will you? That will help us a lot.
If you're watching it, there should be a link right down there to the
somewhere
right.
Down there, wherever, we don't know, but not on your phone, apparently, I'm told. But you can find it, and we really appreciate you being here. Reach out to us. You're in the deep waters now.